In this presentation, we will be discussing two films, Christopher Columbus, The Discovery, and 1492, The Conquest of Paradise. We will be analyzing how effectively the films live up to their claims of historical truthfulness. So if we're going to analyze whether or not each film lived up to its truthfulness, we first have to define the claims that were made. In the first film, Christopher Columbus, The Discovery, there was no explicit claim to truth. We were never told that it was a true story or that it was even based off of one. As far as implicit claims go, the title is the only concrete piece of information that would lead me to believe that the film held any truth to history. There were no dates given throughout the film, and the entire thing, from beginning to end, was very vague, which I thought left a lot of room for the film to be dramatized. After watching the film in its entirety, I would say that I believed it to be loosely factual and that it had a weak truth claim. In the second film, 1492, The Conquest of Paradise, again, gave no explicit claim to truth. However, I thought that this film was far stronger than the first one. It had a very strong implicit truth claim. The film opened by rolling a line of credits that stated, 500 years ago, Spain was gripped by fear and superstition, ruled by the crown and ruthless inquisition that persecuted men for daring to dream. One man challenged this power. Driven by his sense of destiny, he crossed the sea of darkness in search of honor, gold, and the greater glory of God. By opening with these lines, it prepared the viewer to believe that the film was a real account of history. It also set the time period and the setting. The ending of this film was another strength in terms of truth claims. It told how Fernando wrote a biography of his father. It also ended with a quote from Christopher Columbus himself that stated, "Life has more imagination than we carry in our dreams." This quote implicitly reinforced once again the idea that the film that we had just watched was truthful.
I felt for both films visually, they gave a really good depiction. For the first film that I watched, Christopher Columbus, The Discovery, you could tell that the film was a little bit more dated than the second film. But overall, I felt that both films did a really good job depicting that visual image of the way they used to dress during that time, the clothing, as well as even the scenery. I felt that they depicted the buildings really well. That scene in Christopher Columbus: The Discovery where he's walking through the marketplace and the man's trying to sell him silk. I felt, and then also as well as the scene with in the second film where the women were getting burned by the stake. I liked that they gave that outside knowledge. I thought that both films really did a good job of depicting that visual of how it was back then. Although I did feel like the second film, like I said, was more up to date and gave a little bit more background knowledge because they did start the scene off with him as a child, and also you heard him speaking in the beginning of the credits. And also in the beginning of the credits, they gave like a little synopsis or background knowledge of Christopher Columbus. So I felt that they did a better job, and it was a little bit more realistic and authentic. So for both films, Christopher Columbus: The Discovery and 1492: The Conquest of Paradise, I felt that both films had a really positive oral accuracy. I felt that both films portrayed their characters with accurate accents that you would typically find during that time frame. Back then, when Christopher Columbus was alive, I also felt that the film in the first film the music started off really light and upbeat. I heard a lot of woodwind instruments, kind of sounded like some type of flute, and it really made me feel like they were taking me on some type of conquest or journey. Versus in film two, the 1492 film, the beginning started off with really eerie music, and they also had really dark colors, a lot of dark reds and dark and blacks. So to me, it made the film seem a little bit more darker and mysterious. I felt that both films also had somewhat of a similar storyline. I mean, they both were talking about Christopher Columbus and basically his voyage to the New World. However, I just felt that both films had a different way of going about doing so. I felt that the first film, you see him in the marketplace, and it's just him as an adult, and so it doesn't really give any background knowledge. I think that our audience is supposed to already know who Christopher Columbus is, and you just kind of see him like on his quest to, well, you see him with his vision, and then going forth with that. Whereas in the second film, again, like I said before, you see they give a background knowledge. You get that little synopsis of about Christopher Columbus and basically a little sum up of what he did, and then also you get the audio of Christopher Columbus speaking about him as a child and what his father told him and all this stuff. So I feel like it really kind of takes you back. And you kind of see it from the beginning. So chronologically, I felt that the second film was a little bit more easy to follow. Also, like I said before, the second film was a little bit more up to date. I felt that their set and their just overall, it just gave a better depiction, and that also made it easier for me to follow through the film. I also like that they give an accurate visual of how it was during that time of year. Again, that going back to that example of the women being set on fire, that was kind of outside. It really, to me, it didn't really have anything to do with Christopher Columbus directly in his story, but I felt that during those times and the witch hunt trials, that was going on. So I felt like they gave an overall depiction of, okay, this is how it was back then, which made the movie overall easier to follow.
In my opinion, I thought the first film had three main themes: power, religion, and adventure. Christopher Columbus wanted to make these voyages and discover new land. From his discoveries, he wanted a tenth of the revenue of Portuguese trade and to be made the Admiral of the Sea. He wanted a title that would be passed down to his family generation after generation, and he also wanted money. A formal title and wealth would give him the power to help his family out of an impoverished lifestyle. Religion was also a consistent theme throughout the entire film. The Queen wanted Christopher to convert as many people as he could to Christianity and share their faith with the New World. Adventure was displayed by Columbus spending his whole life dedicated to his travels and discoveries, even when people were doubting him. He was persistent, even after being turned down by the king and queen. The idea of failure was not an option. He wanted to do what no man had the courage to do, to travel out to sea blindly in search of a new world. I thought that the second film represented the same themes as we saw in the first one. Again, we see Christopher Columbus seeking recognition and wanting the highest title of nobility given to a foreigner. Like the previous film, he wanted financial compensation, which would also give him power. He refused to bargain, even though the king told him he was being too ambitious. Religion was important again. Christopher Columbus agreed to spread the word of God to the new places that he would discover. And adventure was the third theme in the second film as well. The fact that Christopher Columbus planned and executed these voyages, even when nobody thought it was possible, goes to show how adventurous he was. He didn't show fear. He knew that he wanted to make history and prove everyone wrong. Thematically, I think both films were accurate in respect to Christopher Columbus. I feel like all three of these themes would have been relevant to him during the time. Both films, in my opinion, captured the essence of what I know to be true about Christopher Columbus's voyages. I agree with Sierra, and by saying overall both films were a good representation of Christopher Columbus's voyages, visually, orally, chronologically, and thematically. I do believe that both films lived up to their truth claims. I would say that the second film had a stronger truth claim, which makes it easier to believe as a viewer. And overall, I would say that the second film was just easier to follow in general. There are about 5 different times. The film actually gave specific dates and places of where they were during their voyages. So overall, I just feel like the second film was just a stronger film in general and easier to follow and more believable.